afternoon. I'm going to call the budget hearing, right? That's what we are. Budget hearing of, what's today? May 23rd, 2016 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Dominguez? Councilmember Hart? Here. Councilmember Hotchkiss? Here. Councilmember Murillo? Here. Councilmember Rouse? Here. Councilmember White? And Mayor Snyder?
Here. So I don't see any public comment for items not part of today's budget hearing, and just so I'll open and close that part of public comment. What we're going to do is Public Works has many different sections, and as we complete each section, I know you have a comment on one particular item, so when we get through the transportation component, you can come up at that point as opposed to waiting for the entire, and it's not last, right? So, okay, good, okay. And thank you for being here today, and we'll see if any other public commenters come in later. But with that, Ms. Bjork, the floor is yours.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director, and I'm here today with my Public Works team to present to you the recommended fiscal year 17 budget for the Public Works Department. Join me in the presentation is Jim Dewey, Facilities and Energy Manager, Brian Demore, City Engineer, Chris Toth, Transportation Manager, Gary Horwald, Fleet Manager, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, and also assisting us today is Brandon Bodette, who did the heavy lifting on compiling this budget and budget presentation. Michelle DeCant, who is our Administrative Services Manager, is on vacation, so she's not joining us today. In Public Works, our mission is to provide our community with a sustainable foundation to thrive by delivering quality services and public infrastructure through efficient and fiscally responsible practices. I will say that while that's our mission, I think all of us works to be invisible. When we think when we're doing a good job is you don't know we're there. So we comprised of 6 divisions: Fleet, Transportation, Water Resources, Administration, Engineering, and Facilities. And we will present each of these divisions. Each division manager will present their division budget. We have got a section for questions at the end of each of the division presentations. We do have a fairly lengthy presentation. It's about almost 140 slides, so it will be most efficient if we ask questions at the end of each division. However, obviously, if you have questions that are pertinent and want to ask them, please feel free. I just want you to know we've got a lot of material to move through. Our department is made up of almost 300 employees. We have 15 managers, 32 supervisors, 248 essentially general employees. This budget does include a decrease of 3 full-time equivalent positions. That is in our survey group, and we will be talking about that in the engineering section of the presentation. We also have 29 performance-based budget programs, or P3s, in the department. The overview for revenues for the Public Works Department is $113 million in revenue. Approximately 2/3 of that comes in through rates for water and wastewater. Streets also is a significant budget with $13 million. And then you can see general fund at 8.4, downtown parking through fees at 8.6, facilities, which is an interfund transfer at 8.1, and fleet, which is also an interfund transfer at 6.1 million. Our expenditures follow fairly closely to our revenues. The difference is about $5 million that is coming from various different reserve funds.
I have a question about these slides. Can I interject?
Well, you heard what she said about how much is there, so I would strongly suggest having her go through each section and collecting your...
I see a spacer, so I'm going to use this opportunity.
All right.
The overview, you mentioned the managers, supervisors, and general employees. This is my first round through these. Can you explain a little bit about the ratios and what that should mean to me?
I think the ratios are we have our workforce is predominantly made up of general employees doing the work, with our managers and supervisors managing smaller work group units. We, as I said, we have 29 different programs within the department and 15 managers, so managers have multiple programs that they may be managing.
And supervisors, does that include people who are only performing tasks and not necessarily managing people, or is that
Those are designated supervisory positions where they have responsibility for providing supervision to the employees. We do actually have some functional supervision provided by crew leads. We do not count those among the supervisors. The supervisors would be those people represented by our supervisory group.
So is this ratio pretty stable within your department, or does that change over time?
It has been pretty stable over time, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
So the general fund programs within the department are administration, engineering, and environmental compliance. I'm going to talk about administration. The administration division of the department monitors and coordinates the department's budget. At $118 million, that's a big job. We coordinate the city's capital improvement program. That's the plan for the entire city of projects that we put together each 2 years. And we're just about to begin that program again, working with all of the different departments to identify capital needs, prioritize, plan, and try and capture the associated costs. Administration is responsible for P3 program management, training for administrative staff throughout the department, supporting division management, and providing support to other city departments. Our revenues are very close to the original plan. You see a small downward adjustment that is reflected in the salaries and benefit savings that we are projecting to have within the administration division this next year. And that's mostly due to turnover and people coming in at a lower step than the person they're replacing. So with that, that's my program for administration, and I will turn it over to Mr. Dewey.
So I'm Jim Dewey. I'm the Facilities and Energy Manager, and I'll be providing a brief overview of the Facilities Division budget. So the Facilities Division of Public Works provides services to city departments in 8 programs: building maintenance, energy conservation, environmental compliance, electronic maintenance, custodial services, facilities capital, annex yard operations, and a new program this coming year, utilities management. The Facilities Division includes 37 full-time employees and provides diverse services such as maintenance and operations of city buildings, operations of radio and phone systems, management of the citywide energy conservation program, and hazardous materials cleanup and vector control in the public right-of-way. So Facilities receives its revenue through allocated charges to other city departments and charges for special projects requested by other departments. 2 items to note for the FY17 revenue are in the area of energy conservation. You can see that there's a reduction in $750,000. In previous years, the energy conservation budget paid for the city street lighting, for the electricity for city street lighting, and for traffic signals, and also for certain select general fund programs. And this coming year, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, we're starting a new energy or utility management fund that will be responsible for paying all of the general fund utility costs. And that's what that increase is there. Looking at our expenditures, again, there's 2 items I want to point out. In supplies and services, we have a adjustment of about $500,000, and that's for the additional energy that we're going to be paying for under the Utilities Management Fund. And then we have a small increase to our appropriated reserve. This just gives us a little bit more flexibility in being able to handle things like unexpected emergencies during the year. Looking at our capital program, our proposed capital program for FY17, we're going to continue our LED retrofit of high-pressure sodium lights that increases our energy efficiency, saving costs, and also decreases our maintenance costs. We'll be delaying the parking lot repaving to help support other priority capital projects scheduled for the year. So you can see there's a reduction of 80,000 there. We're completing the police department locker room this year, so that should be complete here shortly. And so we're redirecting those funds to other projects, namely this next project. We're currently in design for new concrete replacement and extension through the refueling station at the Public Works corporate yard. This project will be combined with the replacement of the underground diesel fuel tank and with an above-ground tank. And we'll also be replacing 2 roofs and old air conditioning systems at the West Side Center. So this is a much-needed project, and it solves a lot of the water intrusion problems that we're having there. 2 other critical programs, the ADA Transition Implementation Plan and Buildings, Walkways, and Pathways will provide accessibility to our buildings and parks. So one of the new programs that we have coming this year is the Utility Management Fund. We're really excited about this. This fund will allow our energy team to manage the payment of all general fund energy bills, as well as the ongoing conservation efforts. As we continue to reduce our energy costs through conservation and energy efficiency and tariff management, we'll realize savings in the fund, which we can reinvest in more energy conservation projects, reducing costs and adding to our ongoing annual current savings in energy conservation of $634,000 per year. Taking a look at some of the key projects from this year from our facilities capital program. We completed a lot of work at the police department. We finished the construction of the new fitness room. This was in the old 911 call center in the basement of the police department, and the police really like that. It's a very sharp facility. We replaced all the old air conditioning equipment with high efficiency equipment, improving the temperature control throughout the building and also saving more than $50,000 a year in energy costs. We're also in the process of renovating the men's locker room and restroom area, something that's been long needed. We completed the installation of the fire training props located at the city's fire training facility. So this prop will allow city and other local firefighters to experience live fire conditions like flashover. We completed a couple of projects in the Public Works corporate yard. We installed a new roof in the Water Resources meter testing room, and we finished a permeable paver project in the facilities and parks lots in Laguna Street. We received a $1.2 million grant, which paid for most of the cost for the permeable pavers. In the area of accessibility, we've completed a couple of projects. ADA accessible entrance ways to the Westside Community Center and an accessible ramp to the Parks and Recreation offices on Laguna Street. So these are just some of the examples of the things that we're doing with that money. Looking forward to FY17, we've completed a new paint scheme for the Central Library that enhances the special architectural elements of that building. And we had all the historic paints sampled and analyzed, and we came up with an approved painting scheme that uses the historic paints to provide a cleaner and brighter facade. We're also going to be doing a lot of work on the wood components on the outside of the building, a lot of renewal. And if you drive by the Central Library, you'll see a lot of scaffolding up, so we should have that done in a few months. In the area of accessibility, we're planning to install a ADA accessible entrance at the south entrance of the Central Library, and this will include an access ramp. We'll be working on two related projects in the corporate yard refueling station. We'll be removing the underground diesel tank and relocating it above ground, allowing us to store biodiesel on the site without a waiver. We'll also be extending the concrete through the fuel island from the entrance at Ortega Street all the way through to Laguna Street. And this will minimize the wear of the paved surfaces from all the large trucks that drive through that area. We estimate currently that we have a backlog of about $218 million in capital maintenance or deferred maintenance in our city facilities. A typical commercial building usually needs a major renewal every 50 years, and you can see from this slide that 60% of our total gross square footage is over 60 years old. So when renewal is triggered, upgrades for code improvements are also triggered, things like ADA accessibility, fire, and seismic upgrades. So currently our capital maintenance is not fully funded, so our deferred maintenance is currently growing. I just wanted to give you a quick update on community choice aggregation. We're currently completing a feasibility study for the community choice aggregation with the County of Santa Barbara and our local cities, along with the County of San Luis Obispo and Ventura. So community choice aggregation provides an option for electrical consumers to choose a greener, more sustainable power mix that is available from the utilities. It also provides for options for local development of renewable power. If the study shows that the CCA is feasible, we'll move on to phase 2, which is the completion of an implementation plan that we'll submit to the Public Utilities Commission. We'll be requesting funding for this around October of this coming year. Could be between about $50,000 and $80,000. And that finishes my presentation if there's any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dominguez.
Yeah, I didn't put that slide in there. The 1.2 million annual, that's the increase to the maintenance backlog every year?
Councilmember Dominguez, that is the shortfall of where we would be if we fully funded the program. We need about $1.2 million to fully fund the program.
Which program? I'm confused.
Can you restate your question?
What is the $1.2 million figure?
It's the shortfall from being fully funded in the facilities capital program. So that our annual shortfall.
So what's the $218 million number?
That is the total combined deferred maintenance backlog. So that is, if we had $218 million today, we can invest that and basically bring all of our buildings up to where they need to be in order to renew them, all the systems within the buildings.
And that number is growing by 1.2 million? I'm not sure what the 1.2 million adds into this.
It grows by 1.2 million a year, approximately.
Is that based on kind of a list of things that are starting to break down, or is that a 10% of our building capital, or how is that number generated? It seems low to me, to cut to the chase.
It's based on a model of our buildings. So we have a system called the Facilities Resource Renewal Model, and all of our buildings are modeled within that. And so all of the makeup, the structure of the building, the type of use it has, all those things are considered. And within each building, we track, when certain building systems have been renewed. So it breaks down the buildings into all the different building systems, which would be roofing, flooring systems, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and so on. And so it tracks all of those. And so every one of those systems has a certain life associated with that. And along with that, every building also has a life of its own. So let's say that, a building like this may have expected life of 80 years. We may be replacing plumbing systems twice during that time, roofing systems 4 times, and so on. But at a certain point, every building is going to have a major renewal effort, and that is not included in that estimate.
The 218 would include the major renewal effort for all the buildings over 50 years old?
It would not. It would include replacement of all of the deferred maintenance in building systems. It does not include a major renewal effort.
So then the $1 million, I mean, even if it was just taken as a percentage of the 200 million, it's a 0.5%. So we're saying we're only growing our deferred maintenance by 0.5%, or is that because every year we put 5 or 10% into reparations in the normal operating budget?
Yeah. Oh, we put in about, 1.8 a year. I mean, the number that we've been investing in facilities has been increasing, so we're doing a better and better job in it. And this is not untypical for any public agency, too. Every public agency has deferred maintenance issues. And basically what's usually happens is that there's a major renewal effort in a building, like Fire Station 1, for instance, where a certain amount of money is invested in that building. The whole building is brought up to current standards, and all the system renewal is completely renewed, and so that building would fall off, and that would go back to, zero maintenance again. And but this shows, according to our model, this is the deferred maintenance backlog in the building systems.
So is it slide 16 that shows the annual amount we put into building maintenance? Or where would I find that figure?
You're not going to find it on that slide. The total amount of capital that we put into buildings would be reflected in the facilities capital budget line items.
That'd be the next slide, 17.
I don't believe that it's presented separately in this presentation, but we can get that to you.
So what is miscellaneous facilities renewal? That's on 17, the next slide.
Miscellaneous facilities renewal is renewal of the smaller projects that are not captured, that are not identified discreetly. Oh, things like small carpeting projects, repainting certain things, replacement of like single air conditioning units, replacement of lighting systems, things like that, just for a specific area of a building.
So if something, let's say the roof needed repair at the library, what line item would that be reflected in?
You mean it's if the library had a problem with the roof?
And, well, I guess we would probably contract that out, but something that we would do internally, where would I find that? We got 140 slides here. It's got to be here somewhere.
Well, it's basically this right here is our capital program for the next year. So if you take the sum of all of those, what the
Well, you just said we're doing $1 million in building operational maintenance every year.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
Where do I see that $1 million?
when we combine the total of the capital renewal along with all of the other maintenance that we do, it's about 1.8 million.
Okay, where is it in the budget here?
Yeah, Councilmember Dominguez, maybe if we could maybe go to the next section, we could find that information in the budget document. It may not be in the slides. The slide is a condensed version of, it's not the entire budget document. I understand what you're asking for, and so perhaps give us a second to kind of show you where in the document itself. It won't be in the slides per se, but it'll be in this document, and we can point to that number for you.
I was just convinced that it was a facilities thing, but maybe it's not in facilities. And then, yeah, so if I could get that information at a later time, and then also the model that you use, the facilities.
Resource renewal model.
Right. Is that something that prints out like a report, or what could I peruse at a later date in that model?
Well, I mean, you can have access to the whole model if that's what you want, or individual reports per building, or a rolled up report. I think maybe it'd be a good idea for me to maybe talk to you a little bit about the facilities budget.
Okay.
I mean, it can be a little bit confusing, but I think I can explain all those components.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I think to that point, it'd probably be appropriate to have a presentation about this issue to the Finance Committee, because I think we're talking about these issues, with the capital infrastructure. So maybe that's the best way to do that, to get in deeper dive in that area.
Sure.
Just a couple little energy retrofit kind of questions. The LED streetlight retrofit of $25,000, is that a fairly consistent number all the time, or is that more or less than previous efforts?
Councilmember Hart, that's just a number for additional, there's a lot of LED retrofits that we want to do, and so that is just a number to cover some more of what we've already been doing.
So it's just as much as you can do for $25,000 kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot more opportunities to do that, and it's also going to be one of the things that we're focusing on, possibly for on-bill financing, which is a 0% financing on our electricity bills, where we can take care of this. But street lighting for us is really becoming more and more of a priority, and it's also an opportunity for energy savings and maintenance savings. So that $25,000 is really just a plug number so that we can continue what we're doing.
Okay. And I guess sort of to all of those things, the question comes to mind when you mentioned the $50,000 worth of energy savings by putting in the new HVAC systems on the police building. You know, are there other opportunities? Is that probably the biggest bang for the buck in the entire city's facilities, or are there other candidates like that would generate that kind of savings? Because it jumps out that we ought to be doing those things in order to save money.
It's certainly a great opportunity, and you know, as we get more and more efficient, you know, we'll have diminishing returns, but there's still a lot of opportunities to replace mechanical equipment. There's a lot of opportunities to retrofit lighting systems. There are a lot of opportunities still.
Well, I guess in that context, regarding the talking about facilities and capital investment, there's a whole component here that if we had capital funds available that we could save on an ongoing basis. And it'd be nice to know how much capital would be needed to capture those savings and where, you know, on the recovery time horizon that those lines cross. And that, you know, is more detailed than we need now, but something else at another time, perhaps for the Finance Committee.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I was also going to mention that the Utility Management Fund is going to identify those types of projects and also provide a return on investment for different project scenarios and track that over time, too, so you really have a good idea about the return on investment from energy conservation.
And Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hart, Mr. Dewey earlier showed that utility,
Yes.
we were creating a new utility accounting, and we as departments agreed to let the energy savings that comes from those retrofits accrue back to that utility fund to reinvest in more energy facilities. So we're creating kind of almost a little mini enterprise fund that will take advantage of those energy savings and revolving fund to keep
And become
reinvesting.
self-sustaining to a point.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
When I think you mentioned in a sustainability committee meeting recently, we're up to about $500,000 that was less money we're giving to Southern California Edison due to a cumulative effect of a variety of different upgrades, facility upgrades. Is that about the number?
624.
624,000. I mean, that's fantastic. So the corporate yard concrete replacement, can we use permeable pavers for that? Does that work there? I mean, it's a low-lying area. I don't know if that helps or hinders flood control or what. But
I would like to use them there, but unfortunately the weight of the trucks and the traffic that we have over there really keep that from happening. But there's opportunities right around that whole, you know, structure to do it.
so where you can, perhaps. and
Yeah,
then-
we're definitely looking for every opportunity
Yeah,
to
okay.
use them.
And then the community choice aggregation, the 50 to 80,000 is not budgeted, although you expect to come back to us to ask for the funding. So I guess the question is, why not just put that in the budget?
Madam Mayor, council members, we don't have the feasibility study completed yet, and we need council direction to whether you want to pursue that or not. And so we just didn't want to presuppose. If there's interest in the fall, we can make that
Find
accommodation.
$50 to $80,000 to do it. Okay. Okay, Mr. Dominguez, did you have another question? No. Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I
Yeah.
could maybe follow up on both Councilmember Dominguez and Hart, I think it's a good idea to bring that facilities discussion to the Finance Committee because it does interrelate to that whole infrastructure discussion that you are having, and we can take more time and kind of walk through that and get you the data we need. So we'll do that if that's okay with you all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. On to Engineering Division.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Brian Demore. I'm the City Engineer for the City of Santa Barbara, and today I'm going to be presenting highlights of the Engineering Division's proposed FY17 budget. The Engineering Division consists of 5 programs. Engineering Services, that's our largest program. Also Land Development Engineering, Traffic Engineering, Traffic Signal Maintenance, and Streets Capital. First, I'll highlight the overall division, which consists of 52 positions and a total operating budget of approximately $9.5 million. And then after I go over the overall division, I'll get into the individual programs. So this first slide here depicts the engineering revenues by source, and primarily we're funded through engineering work orders. As I mentioned, Engineering Services program is the biggest program within the division, and they have cost recovery primarily through charging for work on capital projects. Other sources of revenue include fees through the land development projects. Also, we have some utility users tax and gas tax. Those fund the traffic engineering and traffic signal maintenance programs. And then we have a slice of Measure A, which funds a portion of the engineering services program. And there is a general fund subsidy in there as well. So on the expense side, the expenses are primarily in salaries and benefits. And again, I didn't mention it on the previous slide, but these two, which show the revenues and the expenditures, that's exclusive of the capital program. That will be highlighted at the end of my presentation separately. So looking in more detail at the engineering expenditures, you can see there's one more significant change that's highlighted there under the salaries and benefits. That's a reduction of $526,000, primarily reflective of a reduction in staff that we will talk about more when I get to the engineering services program. There's a few other more minor changes in the supplies and services and special projects. Those kind of cancel each other out. So the major change there is under the salaries and benefits. So the engineering services program, as I mentioned, that's our largest program, 35.5 FTEs, which is a reduction of 3.8 from what we have today. The operating budget is about $6 million. It's backed by the general fund, and there's cost recovery through billing capital projects. We work for a variety of different departments and also other divisions within Public Works Department, and typically working on capital improvement programs, CIP projects, and the staff who are working on that bill against those projects. And that's recovers cost, which offsets the general fund cost. So as we look at the revenues and expenditures for this program, again, you'll see the big reduction on the expenses of $550,000, and that, again, as I mentioned before, that's reflective of a reduction of staff of 3.8. One of those FTEs is a transfer to land development, and then the other 2.8 is reflective of the elimination of the survey crew, which there were 3 people there, and 0.2 of that was in land development. So you'll see that as we get into the land development program. So some highlights for FY17 for the engineering services program is ongoing construction of the desal facility, and that should be producing water for us later this year, just in time. And we also have the secondary treatment process upgrades right across the street at El Estero. That is underway. And the construction of that will continue throughout FY17. In the, sorry about that. In the land development engineering program, we have 8.3 FTEs, which is an increase of 0.8. As I mentioned before, we were transferring 1 FTE from the engineering services program to land development. That's just reflective of the workload in land development. There's a lot of private development happening right now, and so we need to shift resources to reflect that. Operating budget of about $1.3 million. Again, like engineering services, it's backed by the general fund, but in this case, the cost recovery is through charges, through the land development process, and through the public works permits. So no major changes here with revenues and expenses. The biggest thing just being that addition of the 0.8 FTE causes a bump up in the expenses. We are projecting additional revenues from what was in the original plan, but we feel pretty good about that based on the last few years of data. So for FY17 in the land development program, some of the big highlights are the Southern California Edison Downtown Reliability Project, which will be underway next spring and will go on for all of FY17 and beyond. That's going to be a big impact to this program and to the city as a whole. And also Entrada is going to be finishing up their off-site improvements. So we look forward to that. This photo is already out of date if anybody's been by there recently, as some of that scaffolding has come down. The next program to highlight is the traffic engineering program, which consists of 3.7 FTEs, a slight decrease of 0.5, and that was just, you'll see when we get to the next program, the traffic signal maintenance program, it was just a shift from one program to the other. $650,000 operating budget funded by UUT and gas tax, and some of the things they do is identifying high collision locations and responding to resident requests and providing support for other areas of the city. Looking at their revenues and expenses, well, right here we're only looking at the expenses because it's offset by UUT and gas tax. But just the slight decrease, and that is due to the shifting of the 0.5 FTE into the traffic signal maintenance program. Some highlights for FY17, some additional crosswalk enhancement projects. This one here is on Cabrillo. That's been completed, but there's similar work programmed and planned for Alamar at Puesta del Sol and La Cumbra at Callecita, so some additional crosswalk enhancements. Other work planned for FY17 is ongoing traffic signal improvements. We have another Highway Safety Improvement Program grant that we received, and we expect phase 2 of that to begin construction next year. On the traffic signal maintenance program, we have 2.8 FTEs, which is an increase of 0.5, and that's just the shift from the operations side, traffic operations. $1.5 million operating budget. They've got a higher budget because this one pays the bills for the electricity, funded by UUT and gas tax, covers maintenance and repair of 116 city-operated traffic signals. There's also 10 pedestrian-activated flashers and some other related infrastructure Some key objectives for next fiscal year include traffic signal rewiring, rehabilitation for some signals that have conduit that's many decades old, and it just needs to be improved for operational reliability. Looking at expenditures, you see here just a slight bump up, and that's just due to the addition of the 0.5 FTE. One project, this is already completed, but I did want to highlight this to give a sense of what this program does. Haley and Chapala left turn arrows were added. This was completed by city staff. You can see the two trucks operating there. And this was done in response to a collision problem at this location, and we haven't had a left turn collision at that intersection since. So it was a great job on our traffic engineer to notice that there was something that could be addressed easily, and we went ahead and did it, and we've seen that indeed it made the improvement that we were looking for. The last program is, the last engineering division program is the Streets Capital Program, which is funded by a variety of sources, including the utility users tax, state gas tax, Measure A, Transportation Development Act fund, local surface transportation program funding, and a variety of different grants, primarily through Caltrans. For the FY17 Streets Capital Program budget, there are a number of fairly significant changes, and these were done to address a couple of things, one being a reduction in the available funding for capital, but also we've depleted our reserves in the streets fund, and we wanted to have as minimal of a budget as we could going into FY17 on the capital side, so that we could begin to build up a little bit of a reserve, because we know there will be things that come up throughout the year, like street lights and drainage, that need to be addressed. And so you can see we've reduced or eliminated a number of line items here to address that. On pavement maintenance, we're down to under $1 million, which is far short of the need in that area, but we do need to fund that as much as we possibly can, and then everything else are just necessary infrastructure needs. So throughout the year, we may need to come to council for various appropriations as needed, and hopefully we will be building up a reserve more quickly than we're depleting it throughout the year. So on some better news in Streets Capital, I do have a couple of highlights I wanted to point out for FY17, things to look for. If you haven't noticed, we've been building a bridge down on Cabrillo, and that switched sides earlier in the year, so people are now driving on the new half of the bridge, and Lash Construction is out there building the new half on the ocean side. So that's going reasonably well, and it's anticipated to be completed late winter, early spring in 2017. Another key project is the Cliff Drive Las Positas Roundabout, which has been funded through some STIP money, also through general fund money, and that will be in construction later this year. Last project, just wanted to highlight Zone 3 pavement maintenance. That project is out to bid currently, and one of the locations that's targeted is completing the overlay on Las Positas, the northern part of that, towards State Street, adjacent to Mackenzie Park. I think that's the end. Yep.
Thank you.
So any questions?
Can you put slide 50 back? And I guess this question is, I guess, also to the Finance Committee members, and I apologize, I've not watched every single meeting that you've had on this issue, but maybe this is a good time to bring it up. So obviously, that's a big jump down or a big, we already are losing ground when we thought we were putting 2.1 into pavement maintenance, and now it's under $1 million. And I know from my understanding with the Finance Committee conversations, there's sort of two conversations happening. One is how to look for a future revenue option that may go to the ballot, but really not till the end of next year if we get it. So any new revenue really will be 2 fiscal years from now. And then the other conversation is what to do, if anything, between now and then or into the future. So are we going to be able to address this issue this fiscal year? And are there recommendations coming from the Finance Committee for fiscal year 17? Because that to me is, I think we need to find, personally, I think we need to find some more money to put back into pavement maintenance. And the question is from where? Mr. Casey, do you want to start there?
Yeah,
or
Madam
maybe
Mayor,
Mr.
council
Hart
members.
as the finance chair, or Mr. White, or whatever. But
I'm happy to start and
Go
chime
right
things
ahead,
off.
you start.
So we're having a good, thorough conversation with the Finance Committee, been meeting on a bi-weekly basis, and we have a few more meetings to go. And our feeling as staff is we don't need to rush this to tie it up by June 1st when you give us final direction on the budget. Any changes and recommendations that come out of the Finance Committee we can easily do as part of the first quarter update or something like that. So we agree that we think you might want to make some changes to address this issue, but it doesn't have to be in time for your budget adoption. And some of the things that we'll lay out to the Finance Committee for their consideration are there certain things within the streets fund that we don't want to do that could save money that could go to capital? Are there certain things that we do in the streets fund that you might want to consider other funding sources within the city operation that they could logically be transferred to? And we'll have some recommendations as well as that. I think the Finance Committee is going to look at the general fund capital program. That's another option to say, are there some capital projects that could go into one-time money and kind of the trade-offs on that. And so you're right. I think the Finance Committee will be coming up with some recommendations to council about some near-term and longer-term approaches to this. And again, I don't think we need to rush that process to get adopted by the budget. We can easily make those adjustments as kind of first quarter adjustments to the budget.
okay. Mr. Hart, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add is, I think that as Mr. Casey described, there's two elements to this. There's the shifting money out of, or shifting expenses out of the streets capital fund onto enterprise funds that may be in a better financial situation. It's not huge orders of magnitude. We're talking probably $500,000, potentially. And then there are things that are in the streets capital or streets program that aren't classically defined items that you would think about in terms of streets. And the best examples of those are street tree maintenance and graffiti abatement. And so those are captured within the streets fund. They may not be defined as streets projects. The problem is they're something people need and want. And I don't know that anybody would propose not doing those things. So shifting them out of streets and putting them into the general fund capital budget doesn't really change the numbers and the reality. It may make the streets fund look a little bit better, but we'll have the same problem on the general fund side. So there aren't any easy answers to this, which is why the discussion at the Finance Committee rapidly evolved to a bigger, comprehensive conversation about infrastructure in general, and why the facilities maintenance discussion that we'd had just a little bit earlier is integrated into that as well. Trying to get to a point where we can determine what is the real ongoing revenue need that we need to get to a stable place. And I don't know that the previous conversations have captured that as thoroughly as it may need to be.
So I appreciate not rushing into something. However, with this budget, there are certain commitments we're going to make on an ongoing basis that would be hard to undo. One-time money, I could see as long as we don't enter into a contract as one-time money. But certain other programs or other things, if we're adding positions that are currently non-existent, that's general fund money. There's a variety. So I don't want to go down a path and saying, oh, had I known now, I wish we would have restructured another department. And we've already promised a department something that now we can't undo something, especially when it comes to staffing or an ongoing expense that we're initiating. So that's the challenge, I guess, of the timing of this. So what is your suggested, or what is the proposed timing of when to come back to council? Like, is it in the fall? Is it in next year? Is it?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, I think the Finance Committee is within 2 to 3 more meetings on this, and at which point staff will be asking them to make a recommendation. I don't know if the Finance Committee will be ready to act or not. Certainly, we've been very transparent about the need of the Streets Division, and so I think you have that in your mindset now as you're looking at this budget. I don't think we've added very many positions to the general fund that aren't revenue supported by
Okay.
fees and service charges, so I don't think that you're adding new ongoing general fund obligations from a staff position standpoint that you'll regret, as you look at this. But certainly, I think as you look at every outside entity request for funding, and as you look at all the other department requests, if there's something that you think we shouldn't do and put those savings into the streets fund, I think it's very clear we've got a shortfall on streets capital. And so I think you have that information for you now. As we've been very thorough deep dive on this with the Finance Committee and kind of add in other measures, we just didn't feel we could wrap it up by tomorrow, which is when it really needs to be wrapped up,
Right.
because that's when Finance Committee is making their recommendations to the council on the budget.
Okay. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm grateful to hear these comments today, because this is one of the 2 most troubling pieces of this budget is this very number, the one that's up there now. I imagine that this $992,000 is as little money as has been put into paving in modern time, and certainly in memory, in the memory of the crew, the team that we have in place now. It's just not enough, and so I'm hearing that that's just not going to be okay going forward. It certainly isn't with me. I had expected that finance would be a little further along for this meeting today, and I appreciate that we're going to be proverbially grinding on this some more going forward. What are the options? I don't even know whether this meets the criterion of using reserves. To me, this issue is one where we have a depreciating resource out there. We have 250 miles of street that are getting worse. They're at grade C minus now, and in a downward spiral that's accelerating. So it's with that urgency that, and I appreciate Mr. Hart's comments about what are we going to need long term. That's sort of we're looking 2 years out before that kind of long-term funding would kick in if everything goes right. And so that's several years of this downward spiral, which are now baked into our plan. That, again, that's so not okay. It's going to mean if we have had a serious rain year, then our road problems would be much, much worse. And that's the good news about the drought, is that it's forestalled hurting our roads in a very big way. But this is a crisis in this budget, I think, and I appreciate that we're going to be having several more meetings soon to look at the particulars of bumping this figure up substantially.
Mr. Hart and then Ms. Murillo.
Well, I guess the only thing I would add is that it is important to keep in context the order of magnitude that we're talking about here. It's critical to add additional money to this effort, but we do got to remember where the goal line is in this. The Streets Division staff came and told the Finance Committee that we need $12 million a year for 3 years, and then $8 million a year permanently to bring the PCI standard up to the level of maintenance that I think we expect. And so that's a huge number in comparison to what we're talking about here. The $1 million cut in the context of $12 million isn't going to move the PCI index at all. I bet you that isn't even a number that's measurable. In the long run, it's cumulative and devastating, as Councilmember White mentioned. But the purpose, I think what's happened with the conversation at the Finance Committee is the evolution of the problem from being something that we can inject an additional $1 million to help with in comparison to a $12 million need. And that is the real challenge about looking at a revenue measure, is that if we're talking about a sales tax measure that would be a half-cent sales tax measure that generates $10 million a year, we would spend all of it on just maintaining the roads at the level that we're expecting. And I don't think that was the perspective when the other council subcommittee looked at this infrastructure issue, imagining that that money would be available for more than just streets, that we would have revenues to address a lot of the other infrastructure needs that the city has. So I think what the Finance Committee is doing is trying to surface all of these needs, long-term needs, in a way that would look ahead in time and say, how much do we need to maintain the stability of infrastructure going forward, not just inject a certain amount of money and get a certain distance down the field, but how much does it take on an ongoing basis to do all of the things in these various pots and maintain them?
Well, we did know those numbers last year. It was the 8 million and the 12 million the year before. So that's not new news. I guess what I would like to know when we move forward with this is this 1.2 basic $1 million number that's being taken away from pavement maintenance program. What does that do to our PCI by not doing? Because I agree, going down 1 million is not the same as going up 8 and getting up to PCI, but we are losing ground, and it costs more over time to gain that ground back. And so what it costs to. So what is the PCI today? What would the PCI be had we been at 2.1 in a year? And what's the PCI going to be with only 992? I guess because I think if we're looking at new money 2 years from now, we're going to have to catch up more. And so we're going to have to spend more money 2 years from now if we're going to go with this route and can't put any new money, put money back into it, than if we found another way to at least stay at the 2.1 million, knowing that that's not adequate. I think if you understand where I'm saying, how much more money we're going to have to pay in 3 years if we go this route versus if we stayed with what was originally planned in 3 years. I don't know if you have that number, but that would be good when you come back, at least, unless you have a sense of that exponential cost over time.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, we can take a look at that using our Street Saver program and run some scenarios, and I think we can have those numbers pretty quickly. I couldn't really speculate
I don't expect
right
you to know
now,
right
but
now.
I think kind of like Councilmember White pointed out, or rather Councilmember Hart pointed out, was the need is so great that I don't know that you're going to see a difference in PCI running those two different scenarios, but we'll see. I think it'll be interesting to run that.
It'd be good to know. And,
Yes.
and I agree that we need the $8 to $12 million, and that's the bigger, longer-term conversation. But we know that we're trying to at least keep status quo as much as we can, and obviously cutting it by more than half is going to create a bigger problem with one-time money to get back up to where we need to go later. So yeah. Ms. Bjork, did you want
Madam
to?
Mayor, I just wanted to mention, because it's relevant to this conversation, the governor's budget does include about $1.5 million additional funding that would come to the city if his gas tax initiatives remain in his budget. They aren't included here because it's not secured money. It doesn't quite replace the cuts we've made, so it might almost keep us at the status quo, but I did want council to know that it's at least in his proposed budget.
And that's for the budget that the legislature's looking on right now. So
That's
by
correct.
the time the bigger conversation comes back to us after the Finance Committee, we'll have that information?
We should, thank you.
Okay, so that actually, on the plus side of why we want to have that conversation afterwards, to see what the state budget's doing. That's helpful. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Demore, I'll have a question for you on survey services, but first, Ms. Bjork, what I understand that Mr. Toth is now in charge of the Streets Division, and he's working on some internal problems. You're looking at your management organizing related to how that department's managed, and I'm understanding that there was some changes in equipment and that some streets employees have been giving you feedback. Do you have anything to report on that process where the consulting firm and this whole program, you were looking at bringing information together to facilitate changes in management?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, Mr. Toth is going to cover some of that in his section of the presentation. If you would like, we can talk about it after he's given his presentation, if your questions remain.
That's very nice. Yeah, thanks. I'm good. So, Mr. Demore, what is the status? I thought some of the survey services we're coming back in-house or in that department, or what?
So this budget reflects the elimination of 3 FTEs that were part of the old survey crew.
Right.
And we're moving away from that model just with the newer technology. Survey is a lot faster, a lot cheaper, and a lot more accurate. So we didn't need that old model of the survey crew. We do have one of the old survey technicians has been promoted, and he's a engineering tech with the engineering division. But likewise, any new project engineer that we bring on, they have a lot of the skill set to operate the GPS equipment and to go out in the field and to do survey. So I think we're looking to find the right balance between what do we do by contract, which will be any of the larger projects, any work that's being designed by consultant, which is a lot of the work. But some of the smaller stuff, we will look to see what of that we can do using our own forces within the division.
So you're not using the county surveying department after all, or are you?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, we are using county surveyor to do map reviews for the land development process. That's for the Subdivision Map Act. So they aren't doing survey per se. They're not out in the field taking measurements and producing maps for us. They're doing reviews for us on behalf of the land development process. So that's one element of surveying.
And Madam Mayor, we lost that position, Councilmember Murillo, with the retirement of Pat Kelly, who had the licensed ability to review those maps and sign off on them. That isn't a result of the survey crew changes. That was a result of a retirement, and we're trying to find the best process going forward to still meet that need.
Right, and I understand there's some physical resources, sort of a library. So what do you do when someone, a private developer or agent or a public entity comes to you asking for records that the city of Santa Barbara maintains?
Yes, so that's come up a few times, and we would typically invite them to come in, and we have the survey office available, and we maintain those records. So we're able to schedule a time where they can come in and find what they're looking for.
And so you're tracking an individual who is spending time on the surveying function.
Yeah, it could be an individual or a variety of individuals. We're looking to get more people trained on knowing where to find those archives so that we're not relying on one individual to be doing that function, but that does exist within our division. That is a service we provide.
Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez.
Looking at the land development, measurable objectives, I had a couple questions. This is page D101. There's 3 targets that we missed, and I'm concerned. The first one is meet 90% of the target response dates for staff review of building permits at the Public Works permit counter. And then the next one is provide quarterly updates to 90% of active case applicants regarding status of real property-related tasks. And the third is meet 100% of land development team discretionary land development project review deadlines. So we're not missing by much. The first one, the adopted objective is 90%, and we're at 83%. The second one, the adopted objective is 90%, and we're at 79%. And the third one, the adopted measure is 100%, and we're at 95%. How is that looking now? How old are these projections? Are we getting closer or further away?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, thank you for looking at this in great detail. A lot of work goes into it. It's good to see somebody's diving in. Hopefully we can give you some good information on that. So one of the things that I did when I came on board with the division was restructured, and a lot of it was because we knew we were sliding a little bit on the land development and the response rates to the public. So we now have a principal engineer position who their primary duty is overseeing the land development work, whereas previously that principal was divided between working on city capital projects and the land development projects. So that move alone on the restructuring, I think, has elevated the significance of this work. And I can look and see where we're at on this, but I would venture to guess that we're coming up, and I don't anticipate any problems with FY17 meeting those goals.
And just for my own edification, can you tell me what is the exact scope of land development within engineering?
That's a great question, and the exact scope, I think even I am still learning all of what they do. I think that would be something I think I'd like to invite an opportunity to speak to. Yeah.
Councilmember Dominguez, just generally, they're managing the interface between private development and public infrastructure. So we're looking at things like, is there adequate water service? Is there adequate sewer service? Do we need to make improvements to things in the public right-of-way, such as the sidewalk? Is there sidewalk? Is there adequate access? Is it safe to access for the use that you're proposing through the existing driveways? Do those need to be modified? So it's really looking at the interface. The primary core is looking at the interface between public development and management of our private development and our management of our public resource.
Okay, thank you for that. That sheds a lot of light on it. The next question I had was on page D102. There were just some numbers that seemed pretty, there's a pretty big gap. Building permit applications review, that's the second line under program measures. The adopted measure was 1,000 and we're at 680. And I'm assuming that's partly because you received a different number of permit applications than were expected.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, these numbers is just kind of what comes through the door at the front counter. I'm not sure why we have it projected at 680 when the adopted was 1,000. Normally, this is fairly predictable, and typically, I think when we budget, we come in pretty close. So I'll take another look at that and see if we've got a newer number where we're at on permits at this point.
And this is all permits for building that go through Public Works? This wouldn't be community development permits either?
Yeah, this would just be the ones that come through Public Works.
So mostly right-of-way stuff and...
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, there's plan check, right? There's building plan check, and that's in Public Works, not in community development. So that's the nuts and bolts of, no, not true?
The building plan check is in Building and Safety. Andrew Stuffler, Chief
That's
Building
community
Official,
development.
they handle
Okay.
that side of it.
So this is all then this interface of of public. Okay, thank you.
And anything that intrudes into the public right-of-way, new sewer lines, new driveway aprons, those kinds of things.
If I could, just for Councilmember Dominguez, looking through this for the first year, the other program measures, we try to do areas of interest just to kind of see volume level. Are there trends that are changing that we need to be reflective on? So you'll notice the page before, as you highlighted, we set kind of program objectives about kind of timeliness and stuff. This next section that you're looking at, we're just kind of trying to see data, what comes in and out the door, and see if there's any trends or changes over the years to kind of reflect on that. And so you're right, that one number is down from what we've seen in years past, and we have to kind of figure out, is it a little blip? Is it projects more complicated that we're looking at, so it's still the same staff resources? But those are just kind of things for us to track to see if there's any trends of interest.
And the number before the Public Works permits issued, so is that the same type of permit as is categorized in the building permit applications? Because it looks like there's a lot more being issued than were reviewed. So that must be a different type of permit.
Yes, there is a different. A lot of the Public Works permits are not associated with a building permit, so that could be just a traffic control permit, and it's just a standalone permit. So we see a lot of those, and that's why in Public Works anyway, you've got a much higher number there than under the building permit.
Okay. The other big issue or number that looks different is further down, the minor public works permit issued, and it's under $10,000, and that went from a 1,580 adopted to 3,900 projected. So it looks like 3 times as much as we anticipated. And is that the same kind of thing? Are these minor road work permits?
Yes, that's correct.
So what do you think made the extra 2,000 up?
I think we probably hadn't refreshed that number based on history, and I'll be looking more closely at that to see if indeed the trend is that we're up closer to the 4,000 number as opposed to 1,500.
The on page D103, the top number, square feet of city streets that receive asphalt overlay. So are we going to have to revise that 400,000 number down for fiscal year 17 if we drop our pavement maintenance program down $1 million? Is that the same category?
Yeah, likely that number, we would be unable to meet that number with the budget that we have for the capital program for pavement maintenance.
So roughly in half, or what would you anticipate?
Maybe between 200,000 and 300,000.
And I had a question about the cost recovery on slide, I think it was 39. $35 maybe. No, there it is, 39. That's right. So did you say that, what's the percentage of cost recovery we're getting through the project billing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, the land development engineering program is, I would say, has full cost recovery. One thing that makes that a little bit difficult to say for sure what the true cost recovery is, is we know what our revenues are because those are associated with the land development projects. But as far as the expenses, that's a little bit more fluid because we have staff who work both in the engineering services program, 4211, and the land development engineering program, which is this one here, 4212. And from year to year, there may be more work on the private side, and so you may have somebody that was budgeted to be fully in one program, but in reality they ended up working a little bit in land development. And so those expenses don't always track into the appropriate program, and we try to make adjustments year to year to stay as close as we can on that, but I think the last couple of years have seen such an uptick on land development that we may even have revenues that have exceeded expenditures, but in reality I think it's pretty much cost recovery.
So if you go to the next slide, is that what the subsidy line item reflects, or is that something different?
Next slide, you said?
Yes.
So that subsidy is only if the expenses exceeded the revenues, which, and it's a general fund subsidy, yes. But for this fiscal year, for example, I think this program is positive, so there won't in reality be a subsidy from the general fund for land development.
For fiscal year 16 or 17?
16.
Okay. And then if we go back, this is the last question. Go back, it looks like about 4 slides to the engineering services program revenues and expenses. So that subsidy is much larger than the one we were just looking at. And it does look like we're shrinking it through the recommended adjustments, but it's still fairly large. Is there a reason? Is there something we can do to whittle that down?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, we have fortunately whittled that down some from, if you look at the original plan to the proposed, but there's only so much we can whittle that down because there are certain things that engineering services does in support of the general fund for the attorney's office or risk management, and also for other general fund departments. There are minor engineering tasks and items that we do in support of those general fund programs that we don't set up project billing for those because they're just small enough that it's not really worth moving money from one part of the general fund to another.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, in this program, what they do, they charge for their time. And so they set up billing accounts. They get assigned to a project and they will fully account for their time and put that on the timesheet and charge that back. And that's where they get most of their revenue from, that's fully offsetting the cost. I think what Mr. Demore is saying is that there are some requests that they get during the year that don't have billing accounting set up, that don't have money associated, that they still provide a service to the city by providing their expertise and understanding, and they're not recouping and recovering those costs. And so we try to manage that the best we can, but there are still times when they provide a service to the city that doesn't have money associated with it.
That's just hard to understand as an attorney. My colleagues in the private sector bill for everything, even random thoughts. So it's just these numbers are particularly large, so maybe there's a way to squeeze out a little more increment or
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, this is something that we've been looking at for the last couple of years, and Brian is working hard to do a better job tracking this. I think actually, if anything, this number is underrepresented, underrepresents the services provided to the general fund from engineering, and that what we want to be careful of is not the cost recovery is a cost increment to our capital dollars. So we don't want to artificially shrink our capital dollars when our capital needs are big to subsidize the general fund, because it's sort of, we'd like to have our cost numbers be as close to accurate as possible. We're working always to improve that, and through better tracking of the unbilled expenses we do in support of general fund, we should be able to better match this to the amount of subsidy.
great, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions for this division. Thank you very much.
I'm going to turn it over to Chris Toth, the Transportation Division Manager, and he will present the transportation proposed FY17 budget.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time this afternoon. Chris Toth, Transportation Division Manager. I'm going to walk us through the Transportation Division financial and budgetary overview. Looking at our revenues, our total FY17 budget is roughly $13.2 million. And as you can see, it's broken out a little more than half by the user's utility tax. Then after that, Measure A appropriations, and then finally, gas tax. For the user utility tax, we see that the revenues gained have been a little bit under what we would have projected for the last number of years. However, we remain optimistic that in FY17, we will actually see a 2.2% increase over what we got in fiscal year 16. The gas tax has been going down, unfortunately, for the last number of years, and is due to a lot of good things, more fuel-efficient cars, electric cars, things like that. The unfortunate outcome of that is that our revenues have been decreasing, and staff projects that since FY14, we've lost almost almost $2.5 million over that time in revenue. Because of the gas tax revenue reductions. Looking at Public Works Transportation revenues, again, you see at the bottom the $13.2 million figure. You see the utility users tax being a little bit lower than what we originally had planned for. You also see grants being reduced. That's largely because of two reasons. One, we got a very large amount of grants over the last several years for the bridge program. So that's where that very, very large number comes from, the $25 million. And also, we're strategizing in the coming year to use less contributing funds to future grants that we go for. So we're trying to find grants that don't, as we apply for grants, we're trying to apply for grants that don't require a city contribution for those grants. In terms of our overall expenditures, you see the reduction of about $300,000 in salaries and benefits. Those are from positions that we're holding vacant. The other large number that you see is the capital number, which has greatly decreased from the previous years. My presentation slide for capital shows slightly different numbers than Mr. D'Amour's. I'm assuming Mr. D'Amour's right, and I'm wrong. But we both land at the same number for FY17, and that is we both come up with a proposed capital budget of $1.518 million for the coming fiscal year. There we are again with salaries and benefits. Seeing that number is very large. So a couple lessons that we're seeing from this is that streets funding is not keeping up with our needs. The other thing, as Ms. Bjork mentioned earlier, the state is working through the budget process to try and find increased revenues that can go to cities and counties this coming year, particularly to make up for the loss of revenue we're getting from the gas tax. So the streets section is moving forward with cost-saving measures. The Finance Committee has got a lot of information on this already, and we'll probably provide some more. And with that said, we're working to get a new program together this year so that we buy some equipment so that city streets section staff can pave streets. We don't have the equipment at this time. It's been lost over the years, just hasn't been replaced. And so with that said, we're looking to repair selected streets to pave in 2017, and we're moving forward to lease paving equipment that are needed to make those repairs. There's plenty of streets in the city to fix. We're coordinating with Engineering Division to focus on some of the smaller residential streets that typically in our capital program would not get funding through the streets capital program in the coming year or years to pave. And we're trying to address some of those needs. Also, the good thing with that is it is getting our street staff back into the paving business. We're a little out of shape, and so we're going to do some training, but we hope to get productive so that within the next year we'll be able to pave streets at a competitive rate. We're also working to improve the efficiency in storm drain maintenance activities and the equipment that we use. We're coordinating with other city divisions within the department to see if there are some arrangements we can make for equipment. As you know, we're in this multi-year drought, and there hasn't been a lot of rain, and so there hasn't been a huge need for a lot of immediate emergency response to storm drain issues. But we anticipate when we get a wet year, we'll be seeing that. So we're trying to work to make sure we have the equipment at our hand and the staff trained at our hand so that we can respond to those events. We're looking at activities that the street section staff may not have historically done, but over time have come to take the role of responding to meet certain needs. With that, we are moving forward at this time to reduce the portable toilet services at the Yananali Street. This is for the labor line. It's not a large amount of money, but we're trying to reduce $7,000 to $10,000 a year in that service that we provide. We also are not picking up disposable items at the curb anymore. We're relying on the city's Marburg contract to do that. With that said, there's a little bit of delay in service, and that city staff, when they would pick up mattresses and old appliances and use motor oil, things like that, we would pick them up within a calendar day or two. Now, deferring to Marburg, it's a little longer lead time. I would say it's on the order of 3 to 5 days before they'll respond to a request to pick up materials from the curb. But it's a good thing, and that frees up our staff to do other things like road paving.
Just a quick question, if I could. Who should they call, you or Marburg, particularly for this kind of?
I think they could call either, but if they call us, we will route it to our Control 10, which will communicate with Marburg, and Marburg may respond to that more readily because they know us, and we call them every week.
Us being,
The city. So they could call Environmental Services, they could call our Control 10.
give me a number.
805-564-5413.
5413, thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm really disturbed by these first two items. So what do you mean reduce portable toilet services? So where will they go to the bathroom?
Well, right now there are 2 portable toilets at the Ananali labor line area on the Ananali Street, and we're proposing to take one of those away. So there still will be one, but there won't be 2.
Okay. And am I correct, Mr. Casey, that there's a creek that runs near there and that we don't want to encourage any kind of waste, human waste, to get into the creek because there's not enough bathroom services?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, that's correct. That's why we're still keeping a porta potty at the labor line.
Please tell me you're going to keep an eye on that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, we will keep an eye on that. These are part of the issues that we're looking at with the streets funding, that we fund a lot of things through the streets funding that aren't traditionally streets related, but we're going to continue to fund a porta potty there at the labor line.
Right, and not to
through
keep
streets money.
tapping into, the creek's Measure B treasury, but I guess that would be a good argument if we're talking about the creek, and the water quality in that creek. And then, Mr. Toth, we've been having a lot of conversations up here about dumped items and mattresses, and 5 days is unacceptable, especially in the neighborhoods where there. Matt Four was just here telling us that there was 1,200 mattresses in the city in a 2-month period. And so we're looking at increasing picking up dumped items, especially mattresses on the east side and the west side. I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, I think that what Mr. Forbes was reflecting to you probably is very consistent with our conversations with them. Our franchise agreement with Marburg they do have this as part of their contract. So in effect,
I know that.
when Streets was doing this service, they were relieving Marburg of part of their responsibility under their contract. I do know that Finance is working with them to see about getting a better response from them, as well as seeing if they can expand their services. So it's not something that we're doing blindly. It's what we're trying to do is take the people, the bodies. We need the bodies to be working on the streets.
Well, and then the phone number you just gave out is the phone number that I give out. It's in my phone, and it's the phone number that the Westside Community Group, our neighborhood association, gives out. So if we should be giving out the Marburg number, then let us know. The mattresses are a serious issue, and we need more services, not less. Thank you.
So, in our roadway maintenance section, our budget for FY17 is approximately $1.7 million, and we have 10.5 positions that are assigned to that, and they do the roadway maintenance for spot repairs. Hopefully, you're going to see a lot more of that work this coming year. We're leasing equipment that we need to do that important work. Sidewalk maintenance has a budget of a little over $900,000. We have 8 positions involved with that. What we're currently doing is focusing on trying to grind down sidewalks to reduce trip and fall hazards. What we found over time is that everybody sees the big uplifts. Nobody trips over 3-inch, 4-inch lifts. It's the half-inch lifts or less that people just don't notice that they trip and fall and hurt themselves on. And sidewalk grinding is an effective way to deal with that issue. For storm drain maintenance, we have a little over $400,000 allocated for that in 2 positions. And the goal of that is to do what we can to repair and maintain storm drains and equipment, including the Laguna Pump Station operation. For graffiti abatement, we have a little under $200,000 associated with that, and we have about 1.5 positions that respond to requests from the public regarding graffiti markings and removing them, and we do that on an as-needed basis.
Is our MOU with Union Pacific still intact? I mean, I know it kind of, there's a cyclical event, but I just noticed a whole lot of graffiti in the UP right-of-way.
It is intact. It's being renegotiated. Again, if we're contacted, we normally respond on an as-needed basis. We do not go out and patrol hunting for graffiti.
Okay, well, consider this notice that I've noticed a whole lot of graffiti in the UP Parkway
Yes,
lately.
ma'am.
Okay.
With transportation planning, a different section, the budget is approximately $1 million. It's 5.2 positions. 2.2 are dedicated to transportation project improvements, and the others are associated with land development review projects. Well, and I should say that they do a whole lot of stuff associated with planning for our transportation needs. They manage our city transportation capacity. They make sure that we're in lockstep with the city's general plan and other associated plans that are being developed. They're liaisoning with SPCAG and others on Highway 101 improvements, and they participate, as we said, in land development review and ever looking to develop travel mode improvements. Proposed fee changes for this are that for traffic analyses that our staff gets called upon to do, we run a sophisticated software model for transportation modeling, and that's usually associated with private development projects. They charge 15% of that contracted analysis for city staff review fees. And then this is a fairly new fee coming in now, but for ad hoc reviews of projects for which staff in the past have worked for free, we're now setting up a process to charge on an hourly rate for that type of review. For our alternative transportation program, we've got the Downtown Waterfront Shuttle, the Easy Lift program, the Safe Routes to School program, the Employee Work Trip program, Bicycle Master Plan activities, which I'm sure everyone's well aware of, and bike station contract management. So all that's under the purview of our alternative transportation section. It's got a budget of $875,000, and we share the 5.2 positions from the planning staff to do whatever is needed administratively to make this program work. The Downtown Waterfront Shuttle, our component is $615,000 roughly, and the Easy Lift contract's a little over $240,000, and they're the major share of that $875,000 budget you see there. For street sweeping, we work very hard to keep the streets clean. We sweep 80% of the city. We sweep over 17,000 curb miles every year. We, of course, take city holidays off, and when it's raining, there's no point in sweeping, and we collect an awful lot of debris. As staff has joked with me, we collect a ton of tons every year, and so it's a lot. It's a lot that we're keeping out of the creeks with that. For our downtown parking program, we operate the city's parking lots and on-street parking supply. We're staffed year-round. We have over 3,000 parking spaces with 5 structures and many surface lots. We also have the 2 commuter lots on the Helena Street lot. We also pass through monies to fund the Safe RV program, the Safe RV parking program, and there are representatives from New Beginnings program here today that will be able to speak on that in a minute or two. And we also staff the Downtown Parking Committee in all of its activities. When we look at their revenues, the monthly parking fees are something that you see going up. That's largely because we have in our proposed fee structure a rate increase for hourly parking. And we can see.
Go back.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that was woo!
For monthly parking.
For monthly parking. Okay, just to be clear. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And then in terms of our expenditures, we're at $9.2 million. So if you compare that to our revenues, we're taking a little bit out of reserves to fund the expenditures this year, and they're largely due to supplies and services and allocated cost increases, as well as an increase to our capital program in the parking fund. So with overall, the downtown parking program has these capital projects, and that's what shows the mid-cycle adjustments to add that additional $350,000 to our capital program. Also included in this is a downtown wayfinding sign program for which downtown parking is paying $250,000. That's part of the mid-cycle adjustment. And also you see at the bottom of the page, citywide wayfinding sign program also is contributing about $120,000 to that project as well. So our Safe RV parking program has been in place with New Beginnings Counseling Center since 2004, and it's a very successful program. And it has three major components to it to make sure that overnight safe parking exists for homeless who live in their vehicles. It also involves them doing outreach on a consistent basis to provide food and services to the homeless. And also it provides case management to rehouse clients that can comport with the requirements of the program. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Actually, why don't we go to our public comment? They've been waiting very patiently, and then we'll finish up with any questions or comments. So Cassie Roach and then Amanda Staples, come on up. Oh, okay. So you have up to 4 minutes. Go right ahead. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Cassie Roach. I'm the case manager for the New Beginnings Counseling Center's Safe Parking Program. We provide safe overnight parking to over 130 families and individuals nightly. The program currently manages 20 lots located in Santa Barbara and Goleta and the surrounding unincorporated areas of the county. Several of the repurposed lots are made possible by the generous funding of the City of Santa Barbara's Public Works Department and Transportation Division. I would like to take this time to thank you and share what the Safe Parking Program has accomplished during this fiscal year in particular. Our program provides nightly shelter for safety and stability and case management services to assist our clients in transitioning from homelessness back into permanent housing. This fiscal year alone, we have helped to house 51 of this community's most vulnerable individuals. To do so, our program has spent over $59,000 on temporary financial assistance to pay for first month's rent and security deposits. We've also helped to connect 24 clients to employment and 15 clients to other forms of income, such as SSDI. As well, we distribute food boxes to our most vulnerable families, food and gas cards. We provide crisis intervention and connection to other community resources, and we write grants to help our clients receive medical and dental care. In addition to overnight shelter and rapid rehousing case management services, we also conduct weekly street outreach to identify the newly homeless and connect them to services. There are currently 40 people on our waiting list. The Safe Parking Program has recently been receiving a large amount of positive attention from the press. We've received requests from many cities such as Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, Oakland, Seattle, and Santa Rosa inquiring about how they can replicate what we do here in Santa Barbara in order to implement their own program. Currently, we are in the final stages of publishing a best practice manual that will be published by SAGE and is set to be released in the next few months. It is our hope that this manual will be of assistance to other parts of our county and to other cities across the country in their efforts to address the increasing number of families and individuals forced to live in their vehicles. Despite all of this positive press and the program's obvious success, quite frankly, we still struggle to obtain funding. Nonetheless, we continue to actively seek out new lots, and we are currently working with local donors for a possible expansion of the program. Increased funding and additional lots will allow for many more individuals to attain housing and be restored to their greatest potential. The Safe Parking Program's success is largely due to the long-standing collaboration between New Beginnings and the cities of Santa Barbara and Goleta and the county of Santa Barbara. Without our collective efforts, there would be more than 130 families and individuals sleeping in their vehicles in our neighborhoods and on our streets each night. We very much appreciate your continued support and collaboration. Thank you for your time, and our executive director and the program's coordinator are also here with me today, and we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you do. I do have a question. I know this issue, the ordinance committee is looking at all things related to RVs, but in terms of the program and the city ordinance, if you could wave a wand and say we could use X amount of additional something, what would that be?
I mean, funding in general or
Spaces,
Spaces.
new place, you know, is there anything about I guess, and maybe that's not something you can answer right off the top of your head, or maybe Ms. Schwartz, you can answer, but is there anything in our current ordinance that might help, that is not up to your but's potential in terms of number of spaces or lots or, you know, within the city, obviously, because I know you work within the city of Goleta and the county as well, but, you know, stuff within the city would be good to know.
Sure. In general, funding is helpful. There are certain things like we need more porta potties in certain areas. We can always use additional funds for rental assistance and security deposits. We maintain a waiting list anywhere from 30 to over 100, depending on the time of year. So we always look for additional lots and spaces. We had an increase this year, a 456% increase this year in our general liability insurance for the program. And, it was a huge unexpected expense, and it's going to increase again next year. And, I'm not sure that you all understand this, but we actually we insure every single space and every single lot that so 115 spaces we have to insure. And we have to pay for porta potties, and we have to pay for the monitoring every night and every morning, and we have to pay for the mileage and all of these things. So it's actually a significant expense and a significant, infrastructure that's required in order to maintain the program. And I think that we do it effectively, and I think that we do it, as inexpensively as possible. We can always use additional spaces and additional funds.
How many spaces in the city?
Don't know. Do you know if the actual in the city? About 70.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
I had
Did you
a
have
question for
Phil?
Ms. Schwartz.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So we know that it's very hard on the RV dweller when their vehicle is towed. So how often do you think that happens to your clients?
So this is a long and complicated issue, but I just want to actually clarify one thing for people. So we have 20 lots, and each lot has a different personality, if you will. One lot might be families only, one lot might be women only, one lot might be mixed use, maybe some are RV only, maybe some are mixed use. And we have a waiting list, and we assign people to a space first come, first serve. So we actually, in contradiction to what I think a lot of maybe some of our local advocates believe, we actually have spaces for almost all of the RVs that are on our, in our program and on our waiting list. There are many RVs that travel through Santa Barbara that aren't low income or aren't homeless or have absolutely no desire whatsoever to be in a program. And whenever we're made aware of an RV, and we get a lot of calls and emails just as much as I'm sure you do, we immediately send staff out. We try to connect with the occupant of the vehicle. We put flyers. We continue to go back until we find the person, but oftentimes they're retirees traveling through Santa Barbara, or they're people who, have more of a migrant kind of lifestyle, and this happens to be one stop along the way, but they're not necessarily low income or, homeless. And the majority of the funding, with the exception of, a few sources, is through HUD and is specifically for rapid rehousing activities and has an income level. So it's a little bit more complicated than just, we're not housing RVs, or we're housing more vehicles or like that. With regards to the RVs, we actually have all but I think maybe 3 or 4 RVs in our program housed or sheltered overnight. And the issue tends to be some of the RVs, the size is they're huge, they're large, and we can only fit so many large vehicles in a lot. Or they don't have the necessary insurance or registration required in order to be in the program. I think, did I answer your question?
Well, I know it's a hardship when someone who's in your program during the day gets towed.
So the people in our program, many actually are employed and or underemployed. So some will go to a job Some will go to school. We have some people who are in school, and some are on disability and or homeless and unemployed. And it's those people who have become very creative about where they can park during the day. And we do have some clients who are ticketed, but not a huge amount. I mean, honestly, and we've actually paid out of pocket to help some of them get their vehicles back and or pay the tickets and or we've worked to try to negotiate the ticket, but not a huge amount.
Thank you. And I know that we talked about providing 5 spots in the Carrillo commuter lot. And I'm hoping that we can still pursue that. Mr. Casey, I'm not sure if...
We have also, pursuant to the meeting that we had a month or so ago, we have been researching and are still researching and trying to figure out a way to approach the daytime issue. The biggest impediment for us is, in fact, the insurance cost, because we actually contacted our insurance company, and if we have anything to do with a daytime program, even if people sign waivers of liability, we are still liable for each and every space, and it's really expensive for the insurance alone.
Good, okay.
And so that's the biggest impediment for us. I mean, I'm trying to fund the program itself, let alone, additional funding.
You focus on overnight.
Yeah, and then,
course.
there's staff and all of that. I mean, we're not ignoring it, and we're not trying to not help work with it, but I have to get funding for the program as it exists, and then I can look at additional funding for, and resources for the daytime. But that if we could figure out a way to go around the insurance, then that would be at least a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Schwartz, or there for the, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will say as an aside that I've been a very careful observer of the safe parking program since its inception because of my involvement with public or the downtown parking system, and this is as well run as that system has been since its inception. So you guys are doing a very good job. Mr. Top, in the downtown parking expenditures, it mentions 2 line items: special projects and transfers. Would you describe those, please?
Well, the special projects, I believe, might be associated with projects similar to capital projects. And in the past, staff has not done special projects under the operating budget, but they've put them in capital. And we made a decision this fiscal year to take some of those smaller projects and manage them through the downtown parking section itself. And so some of those smaller projects aren't involving the capital program, but they're being administered by the staff. That's my best understanding.
Okay,
of that line.
I'm a little confused by that only because I know in the past we had the transfer out for the Lot 6 mitigation, the MTD transfer, and then we also have the transfer out for half of the plaza cleaning budget that goes to Parks and Rec, which those look closer to those numbers to me, and that's why I'd be confused why they would put them in special projects as opposed to the...
Well, that's my best understanding,
okay.
Councilmember, and I believe you've got a much greater background on this than I do.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we're fortunate to have Brandon Bodette, who has a very good knowledge of downtown parking, and he has informed me that the transfers is for the transfer out for the crosstown shuttle to MTD, and that we fund our a number of things in special projects, including the bus passes. So the bus passes are one of the items that's in there. Other items. So that's information on those 2 line items.
So those are programmatic as opposed to capital?
That's correct.
Okay, that's correct. Because as we go into, I'm just looking at the revenues, and of course right now we have expenditures that outpace revenues by about $600,000. So I assume there's some appropriated reserves or some use of reserves over budget. And then, but on top of that, we also put the $250,000 for the wayfinding signs in there that got into this particular budget. And I didn't know what the nexus was with that, why that became part of that same budget as opposed to somewhere else. Because listed in our budgets, you have under enterprise funds, you have the parking budget, which is not really a true enterprise fund, but it gets listed that way. And then we have it then as part of the public works budget. So it's kind of one of those red-haired stepchild.
The wayfinding, portion of the wayfinding that's put into the downtown parking budget is the signs needed to direct people to the parking garages, as well as the pedestrian signs in support of the State Street Plaza, the pedestrian directional signs on State Street, which will help with navigation. And I think that the reason they were funded through downtown parking is a linkage with the Park Once philosophy, where we want people parking their cars and walking on State Street.
Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez?
On page D107, I had a question about a couple of the objectives.
Yes, sir.
The third from the bottom, and this may just be a typo, but it talks about 375 subscribers, and then in the adopted it says 420. Should that be 375? Are we trying to shoot for 170% of 221?
Well, it could be that those spots are, well, Mr. Bodette might have the answer to that based upon his past experience.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, Brandon Bodette, Administrative Analyst in the Public Works Department. I'm well versed with the P3 measurements as well as the downtown parking. So to answer your question, yes, they're looking for oversubscribership. And initially, this was a new measurement, and they were shooting for 420, and that looks like it wasn't achieved, but it's still oversubscribed. And so they've decreased it for FY17.
Okay. The next question I have, thank you, is on D108. The transportation and drainage maintenance system, the first number there, square feet of street surface repaired. The adopted goal was 75,000 and we're projecting 52,000. What's happening there?
Well, there may be multiple things happening there. The 52,000, I think, is what is projected by our city staff, and it's because they're doing other activities other than paving streets. Also, there are issues associated with the recordation of what we actually do. That ties into what we're trying to do with the Cartograph computerized maintenance management system this coming year.
Updated software?
To update it and have everybody track their activities through the Cartograph software system, because right now I believe there are multiple sources of data that are coming in, from people's handwritten notes to spreadsheets to other, some of which is Cartograph data entry. And so I personally don't have a huge amount of confidence in the actual number, and we're hoping to make it more accurate and auditable in the coming year. And that goes blanketly through most of our P3s in the street section, particularly.
Improve the accuracy in tracking?
Yes.
The second line there is repair 3,500 square feet of damaged sidewalk, including curb, gutter, and driveway. And then we show an adopted goal of 9,500. Is that a typo?
No. I believe that the 2016 adopted goal was what our challenge was and what we were trying to achieve. As you can see, we're falling short of that by a third, and that if you look at FY17, it's even a lower number. It's literally a third. And here again, what we're trying to do is to improve the accuracy of our planning, our actual activity completion, and then our recordation of our activities. And so we're hopeful that that will do that. Also associated with that number is that with the sidewalk grinding project that we're working on, you saw a picture of it. It's a little tricky on how we report that, because apples really aren't apples. We could grind a lip of a sidewalk, and then do we declare the whole 4x4 piece of sidewalk or not? Mm-hmm. Or do we just do lineal feet for sidewalk grinding? So we've got to really update our P3s.
And part of the reason I thought that might be a typo is the next three look a little bit off because it says repaint 180,000 lineal feet, and then our adopted goal is 160. And then the next, or I guess the next one's fine, but then replace 2,000 faded, and then the initial goal for 2016 was 450.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I think you'll see that the objectives that you're reading on the left are aligning with the proposed FY
On the far right.
2017 level. And so they're recalibrating and resetting them. And so they're not lining up with the FY16, but they are with the proposed for FY17.
Okay, so the 2,000, we're just really shooting for a much higher number than the 450. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Great. On to fleet.
Yes, our next presentation will be by Mr. Gary Horwald, our Fleet Services Manager.
Good evening. As Chris said, I'm Gary Horwald, Fleet Manager, and I'm here to talk about the proposed budget for the Fleet Management Division. There is 2 programs in fleet management: Fleet Maintenance and Operations and the Fleet Replacement Program. Our primary goals are to meet the city's transportation needs, maintain the vehicles in a safe condition, preserve the capital value of the vehicles, plan for the timely replacement of the vehicles, and to maximize the availability of the vehicles. Fleet revenue is derived primarily from 2 sources that are treated very similarly. We charge a maintenance rate and a replacement rate to the departments for each vehicle that they have, and in aggregate, those make up the maintenance budget and the replacement budget. The maintenance revenue is relatively static this year. It's based on a 5-year average maintenance rate that we've experienced by vehicle by class. And the replacement revenue is based on the actual cost of a vehicle and adding for an annual inflation cost in order to predict what it would cost to purchase the vehicle at the end of its useful life. Typically, we use a 2% annual inflation rate for most of the vehicles in the fleet, which has proved adequate. You can see in this slide on the fleet replacement line item, we're asking for $94,000 increase from what we were planned, and this is the result of the increase in the cost of new vehicles. The Fleet Replacement Fund is working pretty well, is fully funded. The part of the fund allocated to the fire apparatus replacement is the exception. There is a shortfall in the fire replacement fund, and this is because the inflation factor that we've typically used historically has been 3 to 4% for fire apparatus, and the actual cost increases are running more around 5%. The good news is that we're identifying the shortfall early, and we've got plenty of time to make adjustments, and we're currently working on a strategy to address this shortfall with both fire department and finance. For fleet expenditures, the fleet expenditures are pretty much status quo. The one main item I want to call your attention to is under special projects, the $700,000 increase requested there. And that's primarily due to a project that was planned for 2016 and was deferred and is now planned for 2017. And that's the project you heard Jim Dewey talk about earlier, to remove the in-ground diesel fuel tank and replace it with an above ground, and then replacing the concrete in the refueling area. Fleet's also responsible to maintain the city's refueling infrastructure and the fuel supply, fuel inventory throughout the city. We provide billing services to accurately monitor the inventory and allocate the cost of fuel to the departments that are using the fuel. We account for over 21,000 transactions annually, and roughly $100,000 of that $700,000 request in special projects is to maintain the city's refueling infrastructure and to replace aging electronic hardware for the city's refueling sites. This is looking at the fleet capital plan. So vehicle replacement plans are based on the expected useful life of the city's vehicles and equipment. Each year, as vehicles approach the end of their life cycle, we review their condition and we look for opportunities to extend life cycles based on the condition of the vehicles. And these numbers reflect some success in that area where we've been able to extend life cycles. This is good news because the ability to extend the life cycles is a direct reflection of a successful preventive maintenance program and the job our technicians are doing maintaining the vehicles, and goes to the bottom line of the replacement rates that the departments will then pay in. This is the fleet management staff. There's 15 full-time employees that make up the fleet team. And your fleet has about 480 vehicles and equipment with a replacement value over $40 million. The makeup of the fleet is quite diverse, ranging everything from small sedans, trucks, large trucks, specialized equipment like fire apparatus, aerial equipment, police patrol vehicles, sewer cleaning equipment. And a large part of what we do is the maintenance of the fleet, and this is pictures of the staff performing maintenance on a variety of the equipment. We do a large amount of our work in-house for the maintenance and repair, and we also provide services such as body work utilizing contractual support when we don't have the expertise, specialized equipment, or if unplanned needs exceed our resources. Fleet's governed by a variety of regulatory agencies that monitor the safety of the vehicles and the emissions compliance. And this is a picture in the lower right of one of our technicians testing and certifying the emissions of a vehicle. Fleet maintains 2 vehicle sharing pools and 1 equipment sharing pool. We do about 18,000 transactions a year, over 250,000 miles a year. The benefit of sharing vehicles across divisions and departments allows us to fully utilize our fleet resources and meet the city's transportation needs with fewer vehicles. And that's resulted in significant savings each year. And as I mentioned before, one of Fleet's responsibilities is to manage the vehicle replacement fund in order to replace the city's fleet in a timely manner. We try to purchase the most fuel-efficient vehicles that we can, and we work with the departments to try to identify alternative fuel vehicles or advanced technology vehicles that are a good fit for the department. And this is a picture in the upper right of a Toyota Prius C hybrid vehicle. It's a gas electric, and we recently purchased 9 of those vehicles. They get about 46 miles of the gallon, and we're primarily using them in the shared vehicle pool. The picture on the lower left is our old police patrol units that we've had in service for many years, and you've heard me talk about transitioning to replacing those. The picture on the lower right is the new police patrol utility vehicle that's replacing those. And those have a V6 engine instead of the V8 in the old vehicles. They're rated at a 6% fuel economy improvement over the old vehicles, and yet they have better performance over the old vehicles. We currently have 9 in service, 7 at PD and 2 at the airport. And with that, I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Any questions? You get off without any questions. Life is good for Fleet, you know?
And with that, I'll introduce Josh Hagmark, our Water Resources Manager.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, I do apologize. We have 48 slides left to go. So if you need to stand up and take a break, I understand. But Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, walking through all of Water Resources budget, which includes approximately $73 million in revenue and likewise expenditures. There are 150 staff in the combined program, serving a population of 93,000 people. That's for every one staff, there's 600 residents being served by that staff member. I think we run a really tight ship, and we try to be as efficient as possible. And I hope you will agree once we go through this presentation that we have a lot going on. I'm going to start with wastewater and just give you an outline of where we're headed. I'm going to go over just an overview of the programs that we have in the operating budget, and then review proposed revenues and expenditures for FY17, and then end with a discussion about our fees and rates for FY17. So we have 3 main programs within wastewater. There's laboratory, wastewater collections, and wastewater treatment. The laboratory has 7 full-time staff members and a budget of $1.5 million. The core function of this group is to provide high-quality water and wastewater sampling analysis. The laboratory staff perform technical work for both wastewater and water permit and regulatory needs. Recently, they've embarked on a replacement of their LIMS, the Laboratory Information Management System. This is our way of electronically transmitting data to the states and state and federal regulators, and it's become the go-to way of communicating and keeping everybody informed. Staff will be working on that this coming year. Laboratory staff also oversee the industrial waste program management, which is a program that looks after high-strength waste dischargers, making sure we are capturing the costs and services for treating their high-strength waste. Laboratory staff provide ad hoc technical support to the city's departments like Waterfront and the Creeks Department as well. The collection system has 17 staff, full-time staff, and a budget of just over $3.2 million. The core function of this group remains to be the safe and effective operation of the city's 257 miles of sewer mains. Our sanitary sewer overflow target this calendar year is to have no more than 8 spills. Currently, we have 3, and we'll be presenting on the collection system annual report tomorrow. Later in my presentation, I'll be discussing some options to use one-time funding to address deficiencies in the collection system, so stay tuned. Collection system take a lot of pride in work they do ensuring the protection of the environment and public health. The Alastero Wastewater Treatment Plant has 25 full-time staff and a budget of just over $7 million. The core function of this group is to see that all the community's wastewater is treated and disposed of in a manner consistent with state and federal regulations. This team takes pride in the operation of the plant and the role that Alastero serves in protecting the environment and public health from the community's waste. If you haven't had a chance, I encourage everyone to take a tour of the plant and experience the complexity of what goes on there every day, and of course the pride of the staff who work there. With the $30 million secondary aeration project that was recently awarded by council and getting underway soon, staff are going to have their hands full for the next 2 years juggling the day-to-day operations while undergoing major improvements to the plant. Moving to revenues, I think the message here is status quo. You're going to see slight increases in revenues. Instead of a 5% increase, we're recommending a 5.5% increase. That accounts for the minor adjustment there. And then you will also see the Mission Canyon charges, because this change went into effect last year. We're seeing this pass through the system as well, and this was the end of providing services to the county, collection system services. We continue to treat the waste of the Mission Canyon area, but the county is now managing the maintenance of that sewer system. So, again, status quo, what you're seeing here, as Ms. Bjork kind of mentioned, we've had quite a few retirements in the wastewater program, and so the new hires are coming in at a lower salary range. And so there's a minor savings in salaries, benefits there. And then special projects. This is process control management system, basically some software that we are replacing, Kinetics. It's a software that we currently have, and this is key. And again, this plays a role working side by side with LIMS to help with our reporting and data management. So this year, status quo on fees. There's no planned increases to service fees this year. Buy-in fees, we are currently still working on both water and wastewater buy-in fees, and we hope to bring something back this summer for consideration. So, positive news. We are anticipating a surplus at the end of this year of about $1.2 million that would go to reserves. This is a one-time surplus, and I will be talking about this later in my presentation, what we looked at, potentially lowering rates, and then also what we could do with this funding if we didn't. The proposed rates are a 5.5% rate increase. They account for conservation efforts, additional CIP funding, maintaining reserves, and again, a one-time, instead of the 5, we're looking at a 5.5% increase. And then this is what the rates look like for a low user. They're looking at $1.55 per month increase. And for a maximum water user, someone using 10 HCF or more per month, our wastewater bills will cap out at $2.51 additionally per month. How the city compares to our neighboring agencies, we have Goleta Sanitary District with $35.69 is their average their customer using 10 HCF. The city is at $45.36. Proposed is $47.87, and then Carpinteria and Montecito. These agencies are also looking at rate increases as well that are not captured in this analysis. Moving on to wastewater capital. It's a pretty small budget. Continues to be a pretty small budget this year. Just $3.7 million budgeted for wastewater capital. $2.25 million of that is for our collection system improvement, sanitary sewer overflow program. So a big chunk of that is going to our biggest priority, which is good. The $30 million secondary aeration project does not show up in this. It has been funded, and it's an SRF loan. So the debt service of that will show up in about 2 years when we complete the project. And then we also continue to pursue getting an SRF loan for the biosolids project, which is another $30 million project at El Estero. So what we're see here in the capital program just changing is we've removed this $500,000 from the biosolids, anticipating and waiting now for the loan to come through. And I should mention it now. What we'll be talking about in FY with that one-time money will be taking the $1.2 million and potentially repurposing it for use in the sanitary sewer overflow compliance program for capacity improvement projects that we've identified in the system. So I'll talk about that some more. So with that, the one-time improvements are for, we've identified some locations on Upper State Street where we have some lines that have reached basically their built-out capacity, and we feel like those need to be replaced. Roughly, the project would consume that entire $1.2 million, the improvements in that area. And we weighed that with options to decrease the rates. And what the challenges that we face is that in 2 years, we need to have our rates at a certain place to be able to cover the debt service coming in. So if we were to take a break this year, that means we're going to have to do larger increases in outer years to get to that revenue target to meet our debt coverage. And so that's why we are recommending that we stick with the 5.5% increase this year, make this small incremental increases in rates, and be able to keep up with upcoming debt service. If there's any questions, I'm going to move on to the water fund. Again, providing kind of an outline. I'm hoping to talk about the operating budgets. Then I'm going to go into revenues and expenditures. I'm going to talk about fees and staffing changes, and then the capital program, and end with the rate discussion. There are 8 programs within the Water Fund. It's a very busy program: water resources management, water treatment, Cater treatment, water distribution, Gibraltar Dam, water supply management, recycled water, and meter reading. Water resources management, there are 3 staff in this program: the water system manager, an admin assistant, and myself. The city's water resources management program covers a broad spectrum depicted on this picture, basically showing all of the cities, basically starting from imported water all the way through to the wastewater treatment plant. It's an all-encompassing program, and as you are fully aware, it's been very busy over the last few years. Oops. Then we have Gibraltar. It has a assigned staff of 2 and a budget of $435,000. Despite the reservoir being nearly empty, there is plenty of work to be done to keep this 100-year-old asset operational and ready for service. Staff will be conducting the annual Department of Safety of Dams inspection, along with the general maintenance to keep the roads and facility in good working order and the brush cleared for fire protection. Cater Water Treatment Plant has 15 assigned staff and a budget of just over $4 million. Another critical city asset that is in operation 24/7 to ensure the community and other partners of CARP and Montecito have reliable and safe and affordable water. Along with the dwindling water supplies, so goes the quality of our surface water. The staff at Cater have been working hard to treat the increasingly challenging surface water. This year's budget does include additional funding to treat more challenging water. As Lake Chuma draws down, the water quality will become more difficult to treat. The recent investment in upgrades to Cater will serve us well to treat very difficult water conditions at an added cost. This is not the case for many treatments statewide. The groundwater production and treatment, there is just shy of 1 staff assigned to this program and a budget of $2.2 million. As council knows from my monthly updates, the groundwater production and treatment have been very challenging. Both distribution and treatment staff have been working together to maximize production and keep this local water supply operating. This will continue to be the focus in FY17. Currently, we have 4 wells online in the downtown storage unit and 3 wells online in the Foothill Basin. Water distribution, this is our largest staff. There's 33 staff assigned here. The core function of this team is to maintain and operate the water distribution system, which includes 300 miles of water main, 27,000 service connections, 13 reservoirs, 7 pump stations, 9 wells, and 17 pressure zones. Staff will be focused on water quality issues as raw water quality supplies degrade, water temperatures rise, and water turnover in the system is anticipated to continue to slow. All these factors make the potential for water quality challenges high this coming year. Flushing program has been delayed for several years, but we are using the latest technology to flush the system without losing water this year by taking advantage of that program, which council recently awarded a contract for. It'll save about 50 acre-feet of water that we usually lose when we go through and flush the system. Desal operation in the fall will have big impacts on this group as they will be operating the system in reverse. Main replacement work has been reinstated. Bids have been received for a project entailing approximately 2.7 miles at 5 locations, critical locations that we've identified, and the work for that will begin in July. Approximately $2.5 million for that initial slug of work, and we are contracting for additional support to continue design work on other priority locations. Meter replacement continues to be a priority as we enter a 3rd year of a 5-year replacement program. This is a critical asset to making sure we account for all the water in the system and customers are not underbilled. We have replaced about 9,200 meters so far with the use of permanent and hourly staff. It's a really incredible achievement. And our goal is to replace 24,000 of our small service meters. And so this is a program that we've leveraged, and so far we've been able to stay pretty close to our schedule, which is pretty incredible given all the main breaks that we've had and other setbacks. Meter reading, there are 5 assigned to this program. And accurate meeting is an important part of conservation and our relationship with the community. Staff read approximately 27,000 meters every month, and our plans to move to advanced metering infrastructure has been delayed given the situation with water funds. But we do intend to come back to this when things improve, because we do think it's a great way to improve our relationship with our customers and the information that they have, and they can make better informed decisions about their water usage.
Now's not the time, but down the line, could we talk more about what that really means, the new kind of meters and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recycle water system, there are 5 staff assigned to this program. Still working through the challenges with the current facility, but production has increased to about 1 million gallons a day, which is getting closer to the 1.5 million gallons a day that we would need to meet peak summer demands this year. We have brought on support to help us optimize the operation of the facility, and we are optimistic we can achieve that 1.5 million. We're hoping to confirm that by mid-June. That's our goal. We will be discussing this issue more during the drought update, now scheduled for June 7th. Discussions with the Cranberry Country Club about selling them recycled water are on hold, but we do see that potentially in the long run being a benefit to the city customers to be able to better utilize our recycled water system and reduce the overall unit costs. In addition, Valverde well, which is a non-potable well, will continue to play a critical role this summer in meeting those peak demands. And then water supply management, you notice a pretty hefty number here. There's a lot of money that flows through this particular budget, but there are 7 staff assigned to this program. 3.5 million of this actually gets transferred out to the drought fund, so that's a big chunk there. But the majority of this is attributed, there's 6 million in this number for CCWA, 2.3 million for COMB operations, and 620,000 for CCRB. We did go through and do a reclassification of a position and of our conservation coordinator position to a supervisor this year, really reflecting the need for supervision. There's a diverse group of people in that group, and there's a lot of people working out in the field and on different tasks, and there's a need for that this year. This continues to be a very busy group. As you may or may not have heard, April was a pretty big water conservation month. We achieved 41% conservation in April, solidly bringing our conservation since declaring a stage 3 up to 35%. And I think it's really obviously the community getting the message, but this group does a lot every day to meet with customers, to speak at various community groups and help get the word out, and they really play a critical role. I do have to highlight that the demand for rebates remains strong, and we do have a budget of $240,000 again this year. It looks like we're going to spend all of the $240,000 we had this in fiscal year 16. So we will continue to keep the council informed if we need more money there, but that continues to be a very popular program. Drought Fund. It has $3.5 million approximately, and 3 full-time temporary staff that we brought on to help us address the drought workload. As I'd mentioned earlier, $2 million has been budgeted for water purchases and conveyance this year, $500,000 for the COMB emergency pump project operations, $750,000 for staffing supplies and drought messaging, and $350,000 for groundwater development. Now to move through revenues, just a slight decrease in projected revenues. We were fairly close last year in predicting what we might need this year. And total budget was, total revenues is $48,436,000. And need to note that because when we look at expenditures, as we noted when we were developing these rates do not cover all of our costs this year. We are digging into reserves to fund this year's program. So we have water expenditures. I'm going to focus on supplies and services. What you see here, because we came up with this basically a year ago, these FY17 budgets, this is stuff that has been in our rate model for a while, but changing and updating Munis. This reflects numerous things. Reflects credit card fees. We actually cover the cost of customers using credit cards. We want to encourage that for simplicity. So we cover the cost of that, where most agencies make the customer pay. It increased paving costs because of main breaks and other things. We've contract out paving costs right now for repairs in the street. We have Cartograph, our asset management software that we're upgrading, and then it also reflects $1.9 million for desal operation. And so we had been planning that, but this is now showing up in our expenditures. Special project, down to the next one, special projects. This is reflecting the water purchases that we're now anticipating for this year, along with ongoing conveyance and emergency pump project costs. And then capital, I'm going to talk about in just a second. Buy-in fees, work still in progress, planning for discussions this summer. We will be seeing some significant changes in our buy-in fees. What we have uncovered is that we have not been accounting for the assets that the city has, in essence, been paying into as part of the State Water and Kachuma project. And so we will be incorporating those into the buy-in fees that we'll be facing. And again, they'll be bringing that back for a much more developed discussion. We'll also be bringing back a change for multifamily residential capacity. Right now, there isn't a distinction between single family and multifamily when we talk about buy-in fees. And years ago, we used to have it, and we lost it when we did a big fee adjustment, and we want to bring that back, recognizing that in a single family or in a multifamily residential, if we had a smaller meter we could sell them, we would, but all we have is a 5/8, and so recognizing that their capacity that they could pull on the system is less than a single family. And I'll go into much more detail when we bring this back, but in essence, that's the summary of it. We also are updating some of our service fees to reflect more detailed accounting for labor, materials, and equipment. In general, this went to the Finance Committee, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Staffing, there were 2 staffing changes. Basically, both were reclassification. One was the water conservation supervisor, as I'd mentioned, and one was a water resources specialist. That position was to help out with plan check review, plans that come in. We have now a person that's going to be dedicated to helping review those plans and turn them around in a timely manner. We plan to continued use of 3 full-time limited-term employees assisting with drought workload. And at the request of Councilmember White, we were asked what our needs are in water and water resources, and we believe that this time financial support with rates, budgets, and grants would be a place that we could use some more assistance. Michelle DeCant and Brandon do a fantastic job, but as you see, they have the rest of Public Works to also keep track of. We're a very busy department, and looking at all the work we have ahead with rates and certainly all the grants that are out there, we could use some additional financial support there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd like to chime in on this at this point. I've been watching the water staff for these crisis years basically put the pedal to the metal year after year in terms of, for example, purchasing water. That's a complicated challenge. Obviously, we have the emergency pump that's come into Kachuma. These are examples of the sorts of projects that our staff has taken on, and thinking that, okay, next year the drought's going to be over. Not over. And so here comes the next crisis. And I brought this in today, and I don't expect others of you, what you guys have seen probably is the link. But here's the paper version of our draft urban water management plan, which I've taken the time to read, and it's a really strong document in terms of telling our water story. we needed this document in order to qualify for grants and loans. So in the midst of all this, this management staff sits down and writes a 300-page report on the state of the city's water system. And it's just, and then we've talked about, we've experienced the wastewater system. Again, huge expenses, old systems falling apart, the need to get these applications in now. We'll be hearing more about rates. The rates are a nightmare because they always have to be rejiggered as we reduce our consumption. How do we change how everybody pays for it and make it fair, meet these Proposition 218 requirements? All of this is, again, if it was a one-shot deal, 1 year, okay, let's scramble. But that scramble has gone on for 4 years now. And I strongly believe, and now what we have coming is Proposition 1, which will be a big grant opportunity. Is that not right, Mr. Hagmark?
That's correct. There is billions of dollars now coming down the pike for water projects, and certainly we're lining up and trying to get some money for desal on this. But there's going to be water for potable reuse, recycled water, groundwater management, and we want to be in the position to take advantage of all that money that our ratepayers are contributing to.
So thank you for that. So these are elements. Oh yes, I forgot about the desal plant. I mean, just what an amazing project to take on. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'm just hoping that my colleagues will consider this additional support position. A very highly qualified person is needed to be participating with the rates and with all this grant writing. So I just think that now is the time to move forward with that position.
Great. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Is that one person we're talking about?
That would be one position, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting it in context. Thank you. Keep on going.
Okay. So summary of the key changes to revenues: planning for continued drought conditions with decreased revenues, 35% conservation target, continued drought conditions through FY18. FY17 rates have a planned use of reserves. What has changed since the last time we talked is an improved projection for FY16 end-of-year reserves, which is anticipated to be above policy. It's nice to actually have some good news for you guys for once. And so the question is what to do about that good news. Stay tuned. Let me just talk quickly about capital, and then we'll dive back into it. Major capital, $8 million budgeted this year. $4.7 million is for the main program. We are doing about $1 million worth of valve maintenance up at Cater, continuing to fund meter replacement at about $500,000, and beginning design of the El Cielito pump station. That's a pump station that's really reached the end of its useful life. We've pushed that off, and we just can't push it off anymore. We need to get on that. So we're looking to do the design this year and hopefully fund construction next year if all holds true. And then also doing a mixing system at one of our reservoirs to improve water quality. As we've been talking about some of the challenges, there are equipment out there that we can put in the reservoirs. It mixes the water around and helps with the formation of trihalomethanes, ultimately improving water quality. So what we see here, groundwater supply program, we have reduced the groundwater development budget by $1.5 million. This is in order to reduce our expenses for this coming year. And we've also shelved the work on advanced metering infrastructure. We've set that aside, and so we're just basically doing meter replacement. Those meters are smart meters, so at some point when we get around to doing it, we can plug those in. But at this time, we're not planning to do that. So the proposed FY17 rates are based on continued drought through FY18. Drought-related expenses include desal operation, water purchases, Combe emergency pump project, and others. 35% water conservation. And as we've been discussing, one of the major challenges is maintaining our debt coverage ratio of 1.25. We did not meet that coverage in FY15. Our proposed rates show projected a 1.29 coverage which is barely meeting. And this is usually during a normal year, we're 1.5, 1.6, up to 2. That's usually the kind of the safety margin we have on our debt coverage. But this year's rates have us down kind of right to the nub. And that is why we have this rate stabilization fund. The rate stabilization fund is a source that we could go to and pull money out of and call it revenue, okay? And that'll allow us to meet that debt coverage ratio. And the debt, all of this kind of feeds into the state requirements. We have Prop 218, obviously, where we're required to collect money that's based on our costs for service. And then we have the California Urban Water Conservation, which stipulates how much of that revenue can be fixed versus variable. So here's what the current proposed rates look like. For someone who is a low water user at 4 HCF, their existing bill is $40.29. The proposed bill would be $44.06, a $3.77 increase. A moderate user using 10 HCF it's currently $91.35. Its proposed bill would be $121.88, a difference of $30.53. A high user using 20 HCF, currently paying $216.77, would be paying $296.78, an $80.01 increase per month. Now, here's how that kind of plays out. If someone has not been taking part in any of the conservation that the city's been asking for, they are now seeing an $80 increase in monthly water service based on FY14. However, if someone has been listening and engaged and reducing their water usage, their water bill has gone up approximately $28 since FY14. Significant change in that based on someone following the conservation that we've been asking for. Here's how the city stacks up against our neighboring agencies. When it comes to low users, the city has some of the cheapest water around. Next in line, we'll go back. Next in line with Goleta, and then Montecito and Carpinteria. With our moderate user at 10 HCF, the city is right in the middle of the pack, with Goleta just below and Carpinteria just below and Montecito ahead. And then when it comes to our big users, the city clearly stands out as having some of the more expensive water related to the expense of delivering that water. So this chart shows our financial plan. And wanted to point out the blue bar is the operating expenses. The purple is the debt service. The orange bar is the desal expenses, which is desal service and operating, debt service and operating. And the red part is the amount of money that goes into reserve to help fund capital projects. The increase in expenses in FY17, you'll note that, let me start with 16. You'll note in 16 that we were not projected to meet revenues in 16. We were planned use of reserves. And so, again, planned use of reserves in FY17. And then based on a 35% reduction, we expect to use about $4.7 million from reserves under this current plan, which is a 20%, generates a 20% revenue increase. So I'm going to show this slide and then come back to it again, but this is what we have projected. This is projected reserve target that we're shooting for. Here's we are now just below. We have planned use of reserves, approximately $6 million of planned use of reserves in FY17. And this is what we knew at mid-year. So here's how things are kind of shaking out with the latest projections. Revenues now, we're projected to come in closer to what we expected, are planned at the end of the year. Revenues have been picking up, which is surprising. Expenditures, we've been able to cut costs. We were able to buy water this year and save about $2.5 million, which is pretty significant. And there were several other items that came in. We did not drill a new well, which was able to return that to fund, and we were able to secure some grants, about $1.5 million in grants and $2 million in desal reimbursement cost. Ultimately, where it's now putting us is finishing this fiscal year with $5 million above policy. And where that fits in now is that $5 million will help to bridge that gap next year, where we were looking at a $6 million shortfall. Now we're looking at a $1 million shortfall. So big improvement in projections for next year. So what we did is we looked at, well, what opportunities do we have to lower rates? And so we looked at taking $2 million and putting it towards our operating budget for next year. And what would that do? That would improve our debt coverage, actually moving it to a place where we should be. But then we also threw in there, as April showed us, the community hit 40% conservation. If we continue to hit 40% conservation, that certainly helps out with our water challenges, but it creates some significant revenue challenges, and we quickly could find ourselves in trouble with our debt coverage ratio if we continue to see that. So that's the so the juggling that continues, and that leads us to our recommendation, which is to stick with what we've been published. Evaluating moving $2 million from surplus to reserves into the rate stabilization fund for planned use in meeting FY17 debt coverage. This will move our stabilization fund from $5 million to $7 million, giving us a bigger cushion. Expect to be about $3 million then below policy at the end of fiscal year 17. And hopefully it will minimize the increases that need to happen in FY18, because otherwise it'd just be short-term benefits to the rates. We'd have to make them up next year. Water rate considerations. We are currently facing the most challenging year ahead. I mean, hands down, we are in completely uncharted territories. I feel we have done good planning, and we're going in financially and pretty sound. We have significant water supplies set up, but it's still a lot of uncertainty. We're uncertain about transition costs to different supplies, water purchasing prices, challenging surface water quality, increased treatment costs, the debt coverage ratio, as I'd mentioned, water usage, water conservation beyond 35%, and again, drought duration. You know, is this year 5 of a 10-year drought, or is this year 5 of hopefully a 5-year drought? We have no idea. So our recommendation is to maintain proposed FY17 water rates to ensure sufficient debt coverage, add fiscal year 16 revenues in excess of debt service requirements to the rate stabilization fund up to $2 million. And that concludes my presentation.
There's a dire picture. My goodness. I know we have a public hearing specifically on the rates per Prop 218. It'd be helpful at that point to know how many people are in each category. Because I think we hear this 31% increase if a moderate rate user or high water rate user. And what proportion of our city residents are really going to feel that? Because my understanding is the vast majority of people are really in the low to moderate, but they hear the 31%. And so just in terms of helping us figure out what that really means to users, and if you can, what's the change been over the last couple of years? I'm sure there's less high water users today than there were 3 years ago, and I guess we know, if we can get that information pretty easily, that would be good to see. I mean, as we're seeing more people conserve. But I'm starting to get, those, and rightly so, I get it. Oh my gosh, you're putting it up this time. I thought we just did this. And, and I keep telling him we've used up all of our inexpensive water. The only thing left is expensive water, and we're doing everything we can to stretch it out. Mm-hmm. But it does feel like no good deed goes unpunished, that the more we conserve, then we don't have the revenues to come in and we have to adjust the rates. I mean, that whole, what you just said earlier, it is frustrating, and I feel it. But I think we're doing everything we possibly can to reduce the rate increase as much as we can, and good call on the using of reserves, because otherwise we'd be looking at, as I remember, a 40 to 50% increase in some capacity. So, yeah. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, just a couple of vignettes of what our water situation is. This is, as I've heard Mr. Hagmark say, this is peak well water year. This is am I correct on that? So this is all of the saving that went on for in the good years is of well water, which in the old days, well water was one of the cheaper sources, so well water was just used even almost first. Well, it's been in the bank, it's been banked for the good years, and we have that water available, and it's coming in critically handy this year. Secondly is the whole importation system, which of course state water is part of it, which is now coming in. I think 65% of our allocation is available to us, but Cachuma today is basically at a standstill, even for the last month. It seems it's something around a month where water is being taken out of Cachuma, but the importation is coming in fast enough to just about cover what's being used. So those are two pieces of the puzzle that are going on now. Obviously, as water use goes up in the summer, that's one of the critical moments that we'll be hearing more about in the drought update. But it's obviously a very tough time, and I want to say I really appreciate watching staff handle all these juggling all these different sources and plates. Very impressive, and we're holding our own. Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez.
Anything new on the desal plan? Is it still looking like October?
Yes, but there are a lot of threats to the schedule. In fact, we have a big meeting on Wednesday with the higher-ups at IDE and Kiewit to make sure they understand the importance of October and delivery of that, because basically there's just no more float in the schedule. There's some things that I'm a little frustrated that they waited a little too long on, and I feel like we don't have much breathing room at this point. Mr. Casey has offered to throw in his weight with SCE if we need to get them to move a little faster, but it's a little frustrating. But right now, October is still the planned delivery date. That's what their schedule shows, and we'll be letting them know that the $12,000 a day liquidated damages will be fully implemented if we have any issues with the schedule slipping.
Thanks for that update. And I know we're on agenda for tomorrow, but that might be taken off. But my preference would be to, even if you could come do an executive presentation tomorrow because of the time limitation, given all these things. You mentioned that the water could be warmer this year because of the environment. And I know that was a problem with some of the water systems. I think maybe DC had a problem because then there's greater bacterial growth, and then they have to put more chemicals in to kill them. And depending on the state of your pipes and the materials, that's what led to some of the problems with contamination, lead contamination. And I'm wondering where Santa Barbara is in terms of our infrastructure. Are we well suited if we do have to put in more chemicals to deal with warmer water?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, we're in a very different situation than Flint, and it's theirs had to do with they had soft water that actually started to corrode the pipes, and that's not the situation we're in. Warm water for us, the challenge with that is it makes it more difficult to filter, and it makes the formation of trihalomethanes, which is a constituent that we track and has water quality issues with. It makes the formation of that more susceptible, and that's why we're really the warm water creates more challenges for us to get the organics out of the water, so we don't get those trihalomethane formations. So that's really the issue with warm water, where we feel very confident about the lead in our system. We test it for it frequently, specifically at any property where we suspect there may be lead piping on private property, but we've never had a problem.
On page D121 in our program measures, the cost per millions of gallons at Cater goes up from $550 to $900, and then the chemical costs go up as well. Are these, or how much of this is related to fixed costs?
Yeah, a good question, Councilmember Dominguez. As we treat less water, a lot of those fixed costs get concentrated. on a smaller body of water. But then we've also, because of the challenging water quality, we've been throwing a lot of carbon at the water to help filter it, and that's certainly not cheap. But given that we can do it, I mean, there's a lot of treatment plants that don't even have that option. I feel very fortunate that we at least have that option to help filter our water.
And sounds like you're working really hard and your staff's working really hard. What is the structure of your department? That's something that I don't think I've ever asked or heard. Are you at the top of your department and then you have assistants who manage the 8 different areas, or do you kind of manage them all?
Yes, so I'm the lead of the division, and I have 3 direct reports: the wastewater manager, the water system manager, and the water supply manager. And so they all report to me. And with that team, we get it done.
Great. Keep on getting it done. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And phew, Public Works is always the big one. And great picnic last week, by the way. That was Public Works gets it done, right? That was the theme, Public Works Week. So, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.